Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today we're going to be counting down the top 10 movies that are actually better than the books that they were based on. So I know I'm not the first person to make a list like this. There have been a lot of lists that have been made on this same subject throughout the years, but frankly, I disagree with most of them. On most lists you get stuff like The Shawshank Redemption or The Green Mile, and those are great movies, but the books are also very good. I also see Jurassic Park on nearly every list, and as much as I love that movie, the book is different, but equally great to me. There's also a lot of lists that include the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and while it is absolutely amazing, maybe the best trilogy of all time, and personally to me, just slightly better than the books, I know that one, that is not a popular opinion, and two, if it is better, it's by such a small margin that it's not worth putting on this list. The movies that I'm putting on this list aren't just great movies that are adapted from books, they are movies that are actually significantly better than the book. I'm also excluding from this list movies that are better than the book but also aren't really attached to the book in any way. Like Dr. Strangelove, which is a satire. It's not actually the story from the book. It does have a lot of similarities but takes it in a completely different direction. And Yes Man, which once again has the same principle, a guy who says yes to everything but is entirely different in every single way from the book, which is instead a true story based on the author's experiences when he just decided to start saying yes to things. So while those are enjoyable movies, Dr. Strangelove in particular being one of the greatest movies of all time, I didn't include it because it just didn't really feel like a proper adaptation to me. That doesn't mean that you can't change things while adapting, but when the outcome is something that doesn't even resemble the original thing, that's not really an adaptation, it's more of an inspiration. At least that's how I take it. But that is enough for me. Let's get on finally with this list. Number 10. The Mist. Frank Darabont adapted many of Stephen King's books into movies. I mean, we already mentioned The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, but he also did The Mist. Now, The Mist doesn't have the same critical acclaim as either of those, and for good reason, it's not as good of a movie as either of those. But there is something that is distinct about it that the other two don't have. It is monumentally better than the source material for one major reason: the ending. Now, The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile may be slightly better than the books in a couple of different ways, but they stay pretty faithful. The Mist is faithful to a point, and then the ending is completely different. And that is a wonderful thing. Stephen King himself even said that his ending in the book would not have made for a good movie, so he admitted that the ending needed to be changed. The ending that Frank Darabont came up with, he said, was perfect and completed the film. It is one of the most iconic endings of all time. A lot of people know about the ending who also have never seen the movie. I mean, I knew the ending to this movie years before I ever actually sat down and watched it. Number 9. Mary Poppins. Throughout Mary Poppins, there are a few different changes, but there's really only one change that matters, and it is Mary Poppins. She's completely different. If you've seen the movie Mary Poppins, which I would hope you have at this point, if you haven't, get on that, there is a certain aura around Mary Poppins where she is stern and she is proper, but she's also able to have a fun side, and she's lovable and caring and sincere and honest and genuine, and there's so many lovable things about her that endear us to her despite her stern side that keeps the family in order and running. She knows when there's time for no nonsense behavior, but still can partake in a dance or two or a song number. Great song numbers, by the way, that couldn't possibly have been included in the book and so obviously weren't, that just make the story so great. She's just a wonderful, perfect character, or practically perfect in every way. She is the heart and soul of that movie. However, if you've read the books, you know she's not like that. She's just stern and not very likable in any way. She's no nonsense all the time. She's always stern. She's cold, frankly, and that just takes away some of the magic. There's many magical things about the movie: the effects, the music, the imagery, the animation, the acting. I mean, Dick Van Dyke and his wonderful accent are so much fun, but what really holds that movie together and is the crux of that movie is Julie Andrews and her performance. Julie Andrews is not in the book. Number 8. Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. Truth be told, I was never a huge fan of the books in the first place, and maybe that's why I like the movie more, but here's why. There's a genuine reason why. The books are very one note. I read the first half of them. I didn't make it through the whole series because it was so boring, repetitive, but the whole premise of it is depressing things happen, unfortunate things happen, and keep happening. It is a very one-note, one-dimensional story. Lemony Snicket honestly kind of writes in a pretentious way where he's like, look, see, kids can understand and grasp depressing concepts, and so here we go. Nothing is ever fun. Everything sucks all the time. And just, it's really bland and boring and bleak and depressing. Whereas the movie gets across that concept. I mean, the movie has a depressing ending. Nothing is resolved in it. Granted, there were probably supposed to be sequels, but the way it's left in the first movie is perfect because nothing is resolved and we're just left hanging. Also, people die. It's a kid's movie, but people die. There's dark concepts. There's a sinister villain who is honestly, frankly, creepy at times. But it's not just a one-trick pony. The humor in the movie is absolutely fantastic. It's helmed by Jim Carrey, who is hilarious in this movie. It's honestly one of his best performances. I know people don't say it, but it is. And he's not the only funny one in it. Pretty much everybody's hilarious. Like, I mean, even the first scene is this absolutely amazing, beautiful satire of these really overly cheesy and optimistic and stupid kids cartoons that we've gotten forever. That moment of satire is sharper, funnier, and smarter than the entire book collection ever was. The movie stays faithful when it has to, when it is sad and depressing and dark and scary and poignant. I mean, the scene with the letter is so beautifully sad, it's brilliant, but it adds depth to it that does not exist in the books, with the humor and the character development and just the way things move and feel is so much better. I know it's not completely accurate to the books, and people have talked about how the TV show that Netflix made is more accurate, which I don't even really think it is. I think they were just able to do more because it was a series, but regardless, even if it was worse, because sometimes being less faithful is a good thing. Sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Number 7. The Princess Bride. William Goldman wrote both the novel and the screenplay for The Princess Bride, and he obviously knew what he was doing. There's a lot of great things in the book, including the dialogue, which is translated almost word for word into the movie, but there's also a lot of things that really just drag it down. There's this whole subplot to the book about how it's being translated or rewritten from a previous version of the book and partial versions of the book that he's pulling together. It's just kind of weird humor that doesn't work, especially when being put into a movie. You just can't do that. They also spend a lot of time talking about history and politics, and some of it is meant to be humorous as well, but it's mainly just kind of boring and something that you wouldn't want to see in a movie. There's also improvements by addition, adding in the grandfather reading to the grandson. That kind of replaces the whole weird narrating thing and makes it into one of the best things about the movie. Necessity is the mother of invention. It's also what brings out some of the best things in artists. So trying to translate the book into a movie, there was some things that obviously had to change, and the things that changed when being translated ended up being some of the best, if not the best things in the movie. Not saying the book's bad, it's not. But when it was being adapted, there was room for improvement, and they used it. Number 6. The Godfather. The Godfather is another example of the author of the novel writing the adaptation for the film. Mario Puzo worked with Francis Ford Coppola to come up with a script that would capture the essence of the novel, but trim the fat, so to speak. There wasn't a whole lot that they changed through addition, but they took out a decent amount of dialogue, of characters and their deaths, as well as some weird undertones of misogyny and just weird things in the book. So maybe that was just enough to turn your average everyday novel into one of the greatest movies of all time. So it may not be flashy, but sometimes it's just that simple. Get rid of what you don't need. Number 5. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Once again, there's another adaptation that is considered more faithful to the source material in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but once again, I think it is significantly worse because of it. And it's not just because Tim Burton's directing is bad and Johnny Depp's acting choices are intriguing. There's a lot of things changed, added and left out in the Gene Wilder adaptation, and every choice was honestly the right one. The movie is also just funnier. The movie is hilarious, and it's not just Gene Wilder, although he is fantastic. The whole cast is great, including bit part characters. The whole news segment, especially when they're using the supercomputer, is maybe the funniest bit in the whole thing, and that's not from the book, that's not in the other movie. They came up with it for this movie, and it is absolutely hilarious. I love that moment. And then lastly, I will bring up the whole Charlie thing, because I know a lot of people dislike the part in the Willy Wonka, the Gene Wilder version, where Charlie breaks the rules, because he was supposed to be the good kid that didn't break the rules. But here's where added depth and character development comes in. He doesn't break the rules because he's a bad kid. He breaks the rules because Grandpa Joe convinces him to, and it is a moment of slipping for him. It is a moment of him being the bad kid. So he makes a mistake. Everybody does. That makes him human. The moment that then stands out is Willy Wonka calls him out for it and says, hey, you're not allowed to win because you broke the rules. You did the wrong thing. Just because you didn't die for it like everybody else did doesn't mean you get away with it. And so, once again, Grandpa Joe tries to convince him to do the wrong thing. He says, we're going to take this piece of candy he gave you and we're going to sell it to Slugworth and we'll be millionaires anyway. And Charlie says, no, I am a good person. Even though I made a mistake, that doesn't make me a bad person. So here I'm going to take this piece of candy you gave me, and as a sign of my respect and loyalty to you, I'm going to give it back. He didn't have to give it back. He could have kept it. Frankly, he could have sold it to Slugworth, but he gives it back, and that shows that he is a good character, and that is the moment he wins. So, yes, the character of Charlie wasn't ever supposed to do anything wrong, but doing something wrong and then making up for it and redeeming yourself is such a better character arc. It's so much more interesting. So yeah, I was on the bandwagon for years that they shouldn't have made Charlie do something wrong. It kind of ruins it, but actually to me, it makes it better. So yeah, everything about the original Gene Wilder Willy Wonka movie is better than both the movie that came after it and the book. It just is. Number 4, Jumanji. So Jumanji, the book, had very little to work with other than a concept that was great. The concept being there's a board game that comes to life, things can come out of it, it's just a horror movie for kids essentially. And so there was very little of a plot there to work with. But every decision that the original Robin Williams Jumanji movie made, and frankly the Jack Black ones aren't bad either, but the Robin Williams movie made all the right choices. It is both hilarious because of Robin Williams and the side characters being amazing. The acting is fantastic once again from Robin Williams, but also the kids are great. There's also amazing moments of suspense and genuine kiddie horror. I mean, the stuff with the plants that are alive and like eat people, oh, it's so good. The bugs, like I was terrified of so many things in that movie as a kid. Like the imagery of him being sucked into the board, and then also that thumping, that drumming sound, that terrified me as a kid. That is genuine kiddie horror that we don't really get anymore, and it was fantastic. The book is fine, but it's a little kiddie flip picture book. Like there's not a whole lot there. The movie though, that's a classic. Number 3, Forrest Gump. So with Forrest Gump, I'll kind of compare it to what I said about Mary Poppins, because if you ask anybody what makes Forrest Gump good, I mean, you'll probably get a couple different answers, like, oh, well, it's just a really fun concept. You get to see this guy integrated to all these moments in history. That is fun. You might also say, oh, well, it's just visually stunning. The effects were great for the time. Sure, that's true, but the main reason that it all works so well is Tom Hanks delivers the most endearing version of this character possible, where this character is obviously limited mentally, but that doesn't stop him from being a good, well-meaning, good-hearted person. And Tom Hanks just delivers a performance that really makes you feel like he's genuine and earnest and honest. You believe that this character is a good person. Despite his limitations, despite the mistakes he makes, he is just a genuinely good person. That makes him somebody you want to root for, somebody that you can get behind, somebody that you want to see succeed and see what they're going to do next, even if it is a little bit stupid at times. That's why characters like Lieutenant Dan keep him around. Even though they can be annoyed by him and frustrated with him, they still love him and can't help loving him. And that's how we feel as the audience as well. So in the book, when the character is just dumb in like the Patrick Star kind of way, where he's just stupid and doing stupid things, and it's supposed to be funny, and it's not, yeah, no wonder the book's not good at all. Like, nobody really likes that book. It just, I don't even know how. And I watched a documentary on how the movie got made. Like, I don't know who even thought it was a good idea to write the script, but it went through so many hands before eventually it became good. And I'm so glad it did, because it's one of the best movies of all time. But man, that book sucks. Number 2, Shrek. Shrek is a lot like a lot of the things I've just said. It has the likability of Tom Hanks or Julie Andrews, and it has the amazing additions and expansions like Jumanji, because if you've ever read the original Shrek, it is very short, it's very limited. It's just a satirical kids fantasy book, picture book. It is trying to flip kids' fantasy on its head. Like, there's a whole page about how he had the most terrible, horrible dream. There was kids all around him dancing in a field and laughing and playing. How horrible is that? It's very basic humor where it's just, oh, good thing equals bad thing in this Shrek universe. There's no interesting characters, there's no adult humor, there's no actual interesting plot that happens. It's just, oh, he left home, he went here, he met a dragon, he met a donkey, he met a princess. The end. The movie, however, has amazing characters that are voiced amazing by Michael Myers, Cameron Diaz, Eddie Murphy, a bunch of people. They're all fantastic. The humor is outstanding. The animation was far ahead of its time, and I mean, it won the Oscar for a reason. It is just an absolutely amazing movie that pulled the very limited source material in so many different directions, and they were all the correct choices. And so it's not just like Jumanji and Forrest Gump. It's also a little bit like a series of unfortunate events where the feel and mood of the book don't match the movie. The heart is still there. The idea is still there of satirizing kids' fantasy. But instead of just satirizing some boring kids' fantasy books that you could find in a discount bin, it's satirizing Disney. It's satirizing Hollywood. It's satirizing all of the movies we've all seen. And it's much more clever. It's much more in-depth. And it is just so much better written. I mean, it's just one of the best kids' movies of all time. It's just, yeah, I don't know if anybody would have cared about that book if not for the movie. And the number one best adaptation from a mediocre to bad book into a great movie is The Prestige. Once again, I don't know if anybody would have known about this book if not for the movie. The movie takes a lot of liberties with the source material, and they're all, once again, for a good cause. I don't want to spoil The Prestige for you if you haven't seen it, so go see it, please. Everybody probably should have at this point, but frankly, it's probably the least watched movie on this list, which is a sad thing. Maybe more than a series of unfortunate events in the mist, but still. It's not really considered the classic it should be. I mean, on IMDb, I think it has like an 8 point something, but frankly, that may be underrating it. It is seriously one of the best movies I have ever seen, one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it may be Nolan's best movie, and he's got a lot to choose from. It's just an amazing movie. In case you didn't know that already, I'm letting you know it is amazing. The book, however, God, I started reading it because I wanted to make this video. And I really wanted to stop so many times. I finished reading it, but it was a chore. It is, frankly, terrible. It is a terrible, terrible book. It's easier to count the similarities that the two have than the differences. The similarities being there are two rival magicians that hate each other, try to kill each other, copy each other's tricks, and go too far with mysterious things. Things that do involve, I will say, Tesla. I will admit that that is a similarity. But, man, where do I even start? So first of all, the book is told from the perspective of, like, their great-grandchildren or something. Some long-form descendants who are meeting up for the first time and talking, and they are finding journals and reading notes, and also there's this weird sixth sense thing going on where he's like, I feel like I have a long-lost twin brother that I've never met, but I'm sure he's here somewhere. Ugh. It's just so bizarre. And then the ending is completely different. If you've seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you've seen the movie and you know that fantastic reveal doesn't exist. Instead, we got some like weird ghost shit. Like, I don't know how to explain this without spoiling it, but the ending is just dumb and not good and stupid. And it's just so poorly written. None of the characters are interesting. You don't find yourself rooting for anybody. And it's boring. That's its biggest problem, is it's boring. Well, maybe not its biggest problem. The stupidity may be the bigger problem. But it's, yeah, it amazes me that Nolan was able to read one of the worst books I've ever read and turn it into one of the best movies I've ever seen. That's just amazing. That really is. So I wholeheartedly recommend the movie The Prestige. If you've never seen it, please do. It's absolutely amazing. And if you haven't read the book, please, for the love of God, stay away. So there you go. Those are my top 10 movies that are better than the books that they are based on. I'm Simon from Simon's Rants, and that was my rant for today.